Okay, so what was the absolute worst time in all of human history to be born? I mean, really, truly the worst. We're not talking about your Wi-Fi cutting out or, getting a bad haircut. We are talking about civilization ending, coin flip on survival kind of bad. So let's find out.
Think you're having a bad day. Maybe you spilled coffee on your keyboard or your favorite show just got canceled. Well, I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you are going to feel a whole lot better about your so-called problems.
Because today, we are officially kicking off the historical Misery Olympics. We're going to pit some of the most disastrous, downright awful periods in human history against each other to finally crown the undisputed champion of terrible times to be alive.
But first, we've got to set the baseline. You see, for most of human history, just being born was a massive gamble. We're talking about a world where almost a third of all babies never even made it to their first birthday. And if you did, you'd be lucky to see 35. So, yeah, even before our competition begins, the starting point is already pretty grim. And our first contender steps into the ring, all the way from the deep past. It's the year 536 CE, and folks, it comes out swinging, with a combo of climate catastrophe and plague that is just, it's tough to top.
Let's look at the play-by-play here. It all starts with a massive volcanic eruption that literally blots out the sun for over a year. This kicks off a global cold snap, which means crops are failing everywhere, from Ireland to China. And just when you think it absolutely cannot get any worse, just as society is starving and reeling, the Justinian Plague shows up to deliver the final, devastating blow.
And the score for this round, a jaw-dropping 50% population loss in parts of Europe and Asia. Just try to imagine that. You look around your town, and half the people you have ever known are just gone. A truly devastating opening move from our first contender.
But hold on, because here comes our next challenger. It is the heavyweight champion of horror, the 14th century, bringing with it the one, the only, the Black Death. I mean, this era is a legend in the misery game for a very, very good reason. Now, the strategy here was terrifyingly effective, a brutal 1-2 punch. First, you get the Great Famine of 1315, which just softens everybody up, leaving a whole generation malnourished and weak. Then, about 30 years later, bam! The Black Death sweeps in to land the knockout blow on an already vulnerable continent.
And just look at the damage this thing did. In the Middle Ages, life expectancy was already pretty bad, maybe 35 years if you were lucky. But at the peak of the Black Death, that number plummeted to just 17. 17! An entire society where the average person didn't even live to see their 18th birthday. I mean, really think about that. Every single day you woke up, your survival was basically a coin flip. Can you even imagine the psychological toll? The constant, unrelenting terror is something that's almost impossible for us to comprehend today. And the final tally for this contender? Somewhere between 40 to 60% of the entire population of Europe wiped out. It's a statistic so enormous, it's actually hard to even picture. What a powerful performance from the 14th century.
But don't you dare count out our final contender, entering the ring from a totally different part of the world. It's the 16th century Americas, an era we now call the Great Dying, which brought a scale of destruction that is, well, it's simply off the charts. So, in this case, the weapon of choice wasn't a volcano or a rat flea. Nope, it was invisible. Diseases like smallpox and measles, things that had been a part of life in the old world for centuries, were completely and totally alien to the immune systems of people in the Americas. And the result was a biological catastrophe on a scale the world had never seen before.
And this, right here, brings us to what might be the highest score in the entire competition, a mind-shattering 90%. Just let that sink in for a second. 9 out of every 10 people, gone. All within a single century. We're talking about near total annihilation.
In fact, the scale of this depopulation was so massive, so vast, it literally changed the planet's climate. With millions of acres of abandoned farmland being reclaimed by forests, it pulled enough carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to cause a measurable drop in global temperatures. It's just unbelievable.
Now, before we go to the judges' scorecards, we have to give a dishonorable mention to the early industrial age. See, this wasn't a sudden cataclysm. This was a slow, grinding misery for millions of people. It was a brand new kind of suffering born from what we call progress.
For the working poor, life was just a nightmare. You had overcrowded, filthy cities, rampant diseases like cholera, brutal and widespread child labor, and air and water so polluted it was literally toxic.
And here is the truly cruel paradox. National economies were booming, but the health of the actual people fueling that boom, it was collapsing. The data shows that the average height and life expectancy for urban workers fell during this time. It really begs the question, progress for who, exactly?
All right, the competition has been fierce, the suffering immense. I think it's finally time to head to the judges' table and crown our winner.
So let's review the final scorecard. We have the sudden planetary shock of 536. We have the concentrated, terrifying lethality of the Black Death. And then we have the near-total annihilation of entire civilizations in the 16th century Americas. I mean, how do you even begin to compare these?
Well, for the sheer shock and awe of having the sun just disappear from the sky and the entire world plunged into cold and famine almost overnight, the gold medal for sudden global collapse has to go to 536 CE.
Now, in the category of pure, concentrated lethality and the absolute terror of knowing that life had become a coin flip, the winner has to be the Black Death. The speed and the sheer intensity of the dying in Europe were simply catastrophic.
But for the grim title of overall worst, for the most complete and utter demographic and cultural destruction on a continental scale, the winner of our misery Olympics, it has to be the 16th century Americas. A 90% loss is a number that represents the near total end of a world.
So, still worried about that spilled coffee? Look, here's one last thought to leave you with. History shows us a pretty terrifying pattern. The absolute worst times happen when you get climate shock, economic instability, and new diseases all colliding at once. And that just begs the question, how many of those ingredients do we see mixing around us today?